So, 3 days ago, I turned 16, but things didn't exactly go the way I expected. It started off really well. That morning, my parents came up to me super excited and told me they had planned a surprise family trip to the mountains for my birthday. I was thrilled. As the younger sibling, I rarely get big surprises like this, and it felt like they were finally doing something special for me. I rushed to pack my bags, eager to leave. But a couple of hours later, when I came downstairs with my bags ready to go, something felt off. My parents were already gone, and the only person waiting for me was my older sister, Samantha, 17F. She's always been the golden child, the one who can do no wrong in my parents' eyes. The second I saw her grinning, I knew something was up. Samantha looked a little too pleased with herself, which made me nervous. When I asked her what was going on, she told me in her usual smug way that I didn't need to pack after all. I was confused at first and thought maybe the trip had been canceled, but then she dropped the bombshell. There was no vacation for me. The trip was happening, just without me. She handed me a piece of paper, and on it was a list of chores she said I needed to do while they were away. I couldn't believe it. My parents had planned this trip and told me it was for my birthday, and then they just left without me. I asked her why they would do this, and she said that after they told us about the trip, she had convinced them that I should stay home to study for finals. She, of course, didn't need to because she's already finished everything. The chores were just something to keep me busy in case I got bored while they were away. I was furious. I didn't even get a say in this. Samantha just laughed and told me I should be thanking her for giving me more time to prepare for finals instead of wasting time with the family. She was acting like she had done me some huge favor. I asked where our parents were, and she said she had already sent them off to the airport. She had stayed behind just to deliver the news to me in person because apparently they couldn't face breaking my heart themselves. I could barely process what she was saying. Samantha was relishing every second of my misery. I didn't want to cry in front of her, so I grabbed my bags and went back upstairs. I waited until I heard the front door close, and then I let it all out. I sat on my bed and cried for what felt like hours. Samantha has always hated me, but I never thought my parents would go along with something so cruel, especially on my birthday. They had always favored her, but this was a whole new level of humiliation. After I calmed down, I started getting angrier. I couldn't just sit there and let them get away with this, so I decided to do something that would really piss them off. Since they had left all their devices at home, I went into my dad's office, grabbed his laptop, and started going through his contacts. He didn't even have a password on it, so it was easy to find all his business associates and clients. Then I made a bunch of phone calls. I invited all of his important contacts to a surprise anniversary party that I was supposedly throwing for my parents that evening. I played the part of the sweet, innocent daughter trying to pull off a last-minute surprise. And to my surprise, most of them agreed to come. I did the same thing with my mom's contacts. Then I took it a step further and messaged Samantha's boyfriend on Instagram, inviting him to the party too. I wasn't done yet. I also texted a bunch of my own friends and asked them to come over and help set up the house. By 7 p.m., people started showing up. A lot of them were surprised to see that my parents weren't there, but I kept telling them it was part of the surprise. Everyone seemed confused, but I played it off like everything was normal. Once everyone had arrived, I gathered them in the living room and took a group selfie with everyone. Then I dropped the truth bomb. I told them all about how my parents had ditched me on my birthday to go on a trip with Samantha and how she had convinced them to leave me behind to study for finals. I explained how I had been treated as the unwanted child for years and how this was just the latest example of them always choosing Samantha over me. People were shocked. A lot of them couldn't believe my parents would do something so cold. Even Samantha's boyfriend, who was standing in the corner looking awkward, seemed stunned. He had no idea she was capable of being this mean. The room got really quiet after I finished telling them what happened. A few people tried to comfort me, but most just looked uncomfortable and left. I felt bad for dragging them into it, but at the same time I didn't care. My parents deserved this. Before everyone left, I sent that group photo to my parents and Samantha with a caption that read, "Had some guests over for my birthday party today. Guess I'll get started on the list of chores Samantha left for me now." Within seconds, they texted back, telling me to fix whatever I had done and that they were coming back home on the next flight. I didn't respond. I blocked their numbers and packed my bags. I wasn't planning to stick around to face the fallout. I left and went straight to my best friend Taylor's house. Her family has always been really kind to me and told me I could stay with them anytime I needed. This time I took them up on their offer. They were more than happy to let me move in with them, at least for a while. I'm not sure how long I'll be here, but for now, this is home, and I'm grateful to have people who actually care about me. The next day, my parents tried to track me down at Taylor's house. They weren't surprised to find me there since Taylor and I have been best friends for years. When they showed up, her parents refused to let them in. They told my parents they had no business trying to talk to me after what they had done. My parents got angry and started threatening legal action, which scared me. I didn't want Taylor's family to get dragged into this mess. I told them it was okay to let my parents in, and I would talk to them. When they finally sat down, they were furious. They said that no matter what had happened, I had no right to embarrass them in front of their business contacts. They were livid that their reputation was now ruined because some of their colleagues had blocked them after hearing my story. They blamed me for everything. I told them that if they had shown me even a little kindness and not humiliated me on my birthday, none of this would have happened. Things escalated quickly. I yelled at them for always treating me like I was less than Samantha and for always putting her first. I told them that they had ruined my life and I was never going to forgive them for it. It got so heated that Taylor's parents had to step in and separate us. They took me into another room to calm me down while my parents left, fuming. After they were gone, Taylor's parents suggested I consider emancipation. They said it was clear my parents didn't care about me the way they should, and maybe it was time I legally separated myself from them. It was a huge decision, and I wasn't sure what to do. But after talking it over with them, I decided to speak to a lawyer. We're now in the process of filing for my emancipation. I'm still nervous about it because it's such a big step, but honestly, at this point, I don't think I have anything to lose. So, after deciding to go through with the emancipation, I started feeling a little lighter. Taylor's parents were so supportive, and I couldn't have asked for a better place to stay while sorting everything out. But things were far from over. My parents weren't going to back off that easily. The day after we spoke to the lawyer, I received another email from my parents. I recognized the address right away and tried to ignore it, but my curiosity got the better of me. The email started off with them explaining why they had planned the trip in the first place. Apparently, it wasn't even meant as a birthday surprise for me. One of my dad's clients had opened a new resort in the mountains, and my dad had been offered a free stay as part of a business deal. The timing just happened to fall on my birthday, so they figured they'd use it as a family trip. They claimed that the reason I was left behind was because Samantha, my oh-so-caring sister, had brought up the finals, and they didn't want my grades to suffer. They said I had completely misunderstood the situation, and my reaction had blown everything out of proportion. They even threw in a line about how Samantha was just being a concerned big sister, trying to help me succeed. It was such a load of crap. If they really cared about my grades, they could have talked to me like normal people, not ditched me at home with a list of chores. The second half of the email was all about how upset they were that I had involved other people in our family drama. They said I had embarrassed them in front of their business contacts and that they never expected me to air our dirty laundry in public. They went on about how I had never come to them directly to discuss my feelings, so they didn't know how bad things were. According to them, if I had just talked to them, they might have been able to make things right. It was hard to believe what I was reading. They were acting like they were the victims, like they had been blindsided by all of this. But the thing is, I had been dealing with this kind of treatment my whole life. Samantha always got the best of everything, while I was treated like an afterthought. How could they not see that? I couldn't even finish reading the email without getting angry all over again. The only part they got right was when they admitted that maybe the list of chores Samantha left for me was a bit much. But even then, they made excuses. They claimed that if I had called them, they would have come home immediately. I didn't buy it for a second. They didn't care enough to stay behind and explain things to me in person. They had let Samantha do it, fully knowing how much she loved lording over me. After reading the email, I felt more certain than ever about my decision to cut ties with them. I blocked the email address, just like I had done with their phone numbers. I knew they could always find another way to contact me, but I wasn't going to let them drag me down any further. I told Taylor's parents about the email, and they reassured me that I didn't need to respond. They told me that my parents were just trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty, and that it was best to keep my distance until everything was sorted out legally. It was hard, though. Part of me wanted to reach out and scream at them for still not understanding how much they had hurt me, but I knew that would just give them more power over me, so I resisted. A few days passed, and I started feeling more at peace with everything. The lawyer told us that the paperwork for my emancipation was moving along, and I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I even started thinking about what my life would look like once I was legally free from my parents. Taylor's parents said they would be happy to let me stay with them long term, and they even offered to adopt me if that's what I wanted. I hadn't decided yet, but just knowing that they cared enough to make that offer made me feel more secure than I had in years. Then, out of nowhere, things took another turn. My parents got served with the emancipation paperwork, and they were furious. They called Taylor's parents immediately, and from what I could hear, it wasn't pretty. My parents accused them of putting me up to this whole thing, saying there was no way I could have made such a big decision on my own. They said that Taylor's family was controlling me and manipulating me into cutting ties with them. It was ridiculous. Taylor's parents handled it like champs, though. They didn't let my parents bully them, and they made it clear that this was my decision, not theirs. They told my parents that if they wanted to talk to me, they needed to respect my space and stop trying to force their way back into my life. But my parents wouldn't let it go. They threatened to take legal action, saying they would fight the emancipation in court if they had to. When Taylor's parents told me all of this, I wasn't surprised. It was just another example of how my parents couldn't stand the idea of losing control over me. They didn't care about me. They cared about their image. They didn't want people thinking they were bad parents, even though their actions spoke for themselves. What really struck me was how they never once said they wanted to talk to me. They never asked how I was doing or if I was okay. All they cared about was how this situation was affecting them. That's when I realized that my parents didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back so they could fix their reputation. It was all about saving faces. Taylor's parents were incredibly supportive during all of this. They reassured me that we were doing the right thing and that I didn't need to worry about my parents' threats. They had even recorded the phone call, just in case we needed it as evidence in the emancipation case. It was comforting to know that I had people looking out for me. As time passed, Taylor's parents asked me again if I wanted them to adopt me once the emancipation was finalized. After thinking it over, I said yes. They were everything I wished my real parents could have been: kind, loving, and always there for me. Plus, having Taylor as my legal sister sounded like a dream. I felt so lucky to have found a family that actually cared about me, and I couldn't wait to put this whole nightmare behind me. With the paperwork for the emancipation moving forward and the adoption in the works, I finally felt like I was taking control of my life. For the first time in years, I had a sense of hope, like things were finally falling into place. But of course, my parents weren't done with their attempts to control me. They still had one more move to make. Just when I thought things were calming down, everything took a turn for the worse. It was about a week after my parents had been served the emancipation papers. I was starting to settle into my new life with Taylor's family, focusing on my finals and trying not to think about all the drama. But one afternoon, after my last class of the day, I walked out of school and was ambushed by Samantha and a group of her friends. I was always one of the last to leave class because I like to take my time packing up. By the time I stepped out into the hallway, most of the other students were gone. When I saw Samantha waiting for me with that smug look on her face and her little crew of followers, I instantly felt a knot in my stomach. I tried to walk past them without making eye contact, but Samantha blocked my path. "Dot, where do you think you're going?" she sneered, grabbing my arm before I could react. Her friends closed in around us, cutting off any chance of escape. I was trapped, and I could feel the tension building as she tightened her grip. Samantha started ranting about how I had ruined her life. She blamed me for everything: our parents' anger, her boyfriend breaking up with her, and the chaos that had unfolded since I left home. She accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and a liar. But the thing that really set her off was the breakup. Apparently, her boyfriend had dumped her after hearing about what she did to me, and she was convinced it was all my fault. I tried to defend myself, telling her that maybe her boyfriend had broken up with her because he saw who she really was. But that only made her angrier. Before I knew it, she slapped me hard across the face. I stumbled back, but she wasn't done. She shoved me into a wall, and the next thing I knew, she was hitting me over and over again. Her friends just stood there watching, some of them laughing, while I tried to shield myself from her blows. The worst part was when she slammed my head against the concrete floor. I could feel everything going blurry after that, and it was like my body just gave up. I couldn't fight back anymore. I was too dizzy and weak. Samantha kept hitting me, even as I curled up against the wall, crying and begging her to stop. Eventually, she kicked me one last time and left with her friends, leaving me on the floor, bruised and broken. I don't know how long I was sitting there before Taylor found me. She had stayed after school to work on a project and was heading home when she saw me crying in the hallway. The second she saw the state I was in, she rushed over and helped me up. I was so shaken that I could barely speak, but I managed to tell her what happened. She called a cab to take us home because there was no way I could walk in the condition I was in. When we got to her house, her parents were horrified. They immediately called the school and the police, filing a report against Samantha. I could tell they were furious, but they stayed calm and focused on taking care of me. Taylor helped clean me up, but the bruises were already starting to show, and everything hurt. I just sat there in shock, replaying the attack in my head over and over again, wondering how my own sister could do something like that. The police showed up later that night to take my statement. I told them everything: how Samantha had ambushed me, how she blamed me for her breakup, and how her friends had just stood by and watched it happen. Taylor's parents were on the phone with the school for hours, pushing for them to take action. By the end of the night, I felt completely drained, but I also knew that Samantha would face consequences for what she did. The next day, things started moving fast. The school reviewed the security footage from the hallway and shared it with the police. It was clear as day that Samantha and her friends had cornered me, and that she had been the one to physically attack me. With the evidence so strong, the police charged her with a misdemeanor for assault, and the school suspended her for 6 weeks. But that wasn't all. She wouldn't be allowed to attend prom or sit for her finals with the rest of her class. Instead, she'd be forced to take her exams separately, which meant she couldn't rely on anyone else to help her cheat her way through. It was poetic justice. All the things she had been looking forward to were taken away from her, just like she had taken so much from me over the years. When Taylor told me about Samantha's suspension and the charges against her, I felt a sense of vindication. For so long, I had been the one suffering in silence, but now Samantha was finally facing the consequences of her actions. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in a while, I felt safe. But the biggest surprise came a few days later. My parents, who had been furious about the emancipation, finally decided to give up. They called Taylor's parents and told them that they were terminating their parental rights over me. They said they didn't want me in their family anymore, which was honestly a relief. I knew they would try to spin the situation to make it seem like I was the problem, but at that point I didn't care. I was done with them. Taylor's parents started the process of legally adopting me, and I couldn't have been happier. I was finally free from the toxic environment I had grown up in, and I was part of a family that genuinely loved and cared for me. I couldn't believe how much my life had changed in such a short time, but I knew that I was finally on the right path. Now, with Samantha suspended and my parents out of the picture, I could focus on my future. I had my finals coming up, and Taylor and I were determined to do our best. It felt good to have someone by my side who believed in me, who supported me, and who didn't make me feel like I was less than anyone else. It wasn't easy getting to this point, but looking back, I knew I had made the right decisions. I had finally taken control of my life, and no matter what happened next, I was ready to face it. A few weeks have passed since Samantha was suspended, and my parents officially terminated their rights over me. It still feels surreal. The girl who used to feel invisible in her own family is now finally free. Taylor's parents are working on the adoption process, and it's happening quicker than I expected. It's strange to think that soon I'll have a new last name, a new family. But it's a change I welcome with open arms. Life has started to feel normal, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I wake up in the morning without the weight of dread hanging over me. I go to school, I study, I hang out with Taylor, and her family treats me like one of their own. It's amazing how much better everything feels when you're surrounded by people who actually care about you. But just when I thought I could put everything behind me, my parents tried to reach out again. I hadn't heard from them since they gave up their parental rights, but a few days ago, I got an email from my dad. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe some small part of me wanted to see if they'd finally acknowledge how badly they had hurt me. But of course, that wasn't the case. In the email, my dad rambled on about how I had overreacted, how everything had been blown out of proportion, and how they were just trying to protect me by leaving me behind on my birthday. He even tried to spin the story, saying that Samantha had been looking out for my best interests and that I should have been grateful. It was the same old excuses, the same refusal to take any responsibility. He ended the email by saying that they were still willing to fix things if I came back home and apologized for everything I had done. It was so absurd I almost laughed out loud. After everything they put me through, they were still trying to make it seem like I was the one who had ruined the family. It was clear that they hadn't learned anything. I didn't respond. I blocked the email just like I had before, and this time I didn't feel any guilt about it. I had moved on, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their toxic world. Taylor's parents were incredibly supportive when I told them about the email. They reassured me that cutting ties was the right thing to do and that I didn't owe my parents anything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized they were right. I had spent so much of my life trying to win my parents' approval, trying to prove that I was worthy of love and attention. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had found a new family, one that actually valued me for who I was. As for Samantha, she never tried to contact me after the assault. I heard through the grapevine that she was still suspended and that her friends had started distancing themselves from her after everything that happened. It didn't surprise me. Samantha had always surrounded herself with people who only stuck around because of her status, and once that started to crumble, so did her friendships. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had spent years making my life miserable, and for the first time, she was getting a taste of what it felt like to be alone. Maybe one day she'd reflect on her actions and realize the damage she caused. But honestly, I wasn't holding my breath. People like Samantha don't change unless they're forced to, and even then, it's rare. With my finals approaching, I've been focusing on studying. Taylor and I have been working hard, and I feel more confident about my grades than I ever have. It's amazing how much better you can perform when you're not constantly living in a state of fear or stress. I'm actually excited for the future, which is something I haven't felt in a long time. The adoption process is moving forward, and the idea of officially becoming part of Taylor's family makes me incredibly happy. It feels right. I know I'm lucky to have found people like them, who open their home and their hearts to me without hesitation. I finally feel like I belong somewhere, like I'm part of something real. The day Taylor's parents sat me down and asked if I was still sure about the adoption, I didn't even hesitate. I told them yes. I was more sure than ever. They smiled and told me how happy they were to have me as part of their family, and in that moment, I realized just how far I had come. Looking back on everything, I don't regret the decisions I made. It was hard, it was painful, but it was necessary. Cutting ties with my parents and standing up for myself was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most empowering. I had finally taken control of my own life, and no one, not Samantha, not my parents, could take that away from me. As I sit here writing this, I feel a deep sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I'm going to be okay. I have a family that loves me, friends who support me, and a life that I'm proud of. No matter what, I know I'm never going back to the way things were. I'm free now, and that's the greatest gift I could have ever given myself.